we need to restore trust in institutions. We're not all going to independently do our own research in the face of the next great challenge to our society. We need to have people we can trust. We need real air traffic controllers who can keep the planes in the air, right? And so there's been a kind of disavowal of expertise.
Sam, where does this podcast find you?
Los Angeles.
I was struggling with what topics to cover, specifically what topics not to cover. So I thought I'll basically do a buffet here and have you
Sure.
decide of all the things we're most concerned about, or of all the things to be concerned about, what are you most concerned about right now and why?
I think it would have to be the way we're interacting with information. I mean, it just is, and largely this is a story of what social media and the internet generally has done to us. But you can throw into this bin the failure of institutions and the pervasive lack of trust in institutions that is far deeper and more widespread than the failures of those institutions would justify. Right? I mean, people are far more distrusting of the media than the errors of the woke errors of the media over the last few years justify. People are far more distrusting of government and the scientific establishment than the errors committed during COVID justify. Right, and so we've reached this kind of free fall condition, as far as I can tell, especially in independent media and over in Trumpistan. It's just the physics have completely changed, wherein you have proper lunatics trusted as as honest brokers of information. You've got people like Tucker Carlson and a host of slightly better behaved but no less confused podcasters who I might not name here, and conspiracy theorists, people like Alex Jones. I mean, these people are in good standing, right of center, and it's bonkers. And so I fear that we are in a position increasingly where we're rendering ourselves ungovernable, or governable only by half the population willing to get absorbed into a personality cult and continuously fed lies. And it's just I don't know how we would respond to the next proper emergency. If 9/11 happened now, if a pandemic, worse than COVID happened now, if a real war happened now, I think we're in a society that is just riven by misinformation and frank dishonesty, and it's a very dark picture, I think, that of us politically at the moment.
Do you see any sources or paths to repair?
Well, I do think we have to figure out how to reboot trust in institutions, which is obviously a two-sided problem. The institutions themselves have to become trustworthy, and the Trump administration is making that hard now by launching an all-out assault on them in ways that if the purpose was to make them trustworthy, you would go about it very differently, right? I mean, I share the concern that the Ivy League and other universities failed to deal with the explosion of anti-Semitism and frank moral confusion that happened after October 7th. But if that was your concern, if your concern was to merely deal with the ideological capture of so many of these departments and the administrators and talk some sense into them, you wouldn't go about it the way the Trump administration is. So we need to restore trust in institutions. We're not all going to independently do our own research in the face of the next great challenge to our society. We need to have people we can trust. We need real air traffic controllers who can keep the planes in the air, right? And so there's been a kind of disavowal of expertise, especially in independent media and especially on podcasts, as though any comedian who's a quick study and can use ChatGPT can be an expert on the war in Ukraine or the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, or epidemiology or whatever it is, and it's it's a free for all out there, and so we're going to have to. It may require some very clear catastrophes born of misinformation to get our heads screwed on straight. But eventually we're going to bump into some hard objects out there in the real world, and we're going to want to know what real experts think about real problems, and we're going to stop denying that expertise is really a thing. And again, I'm not arguing that mere credentialism is the way you find experts. That's not, we might go into that if you're interested, but because people are confused about this. But the idea that everyone's opinion is worth hearing on every topic is just a colossal load of bullshit, and everyone knows this at bottom, and yet the way we interact with information is not reflecting that.
And I think you share this opinion. There's been so many things, or I don't know if you, that I thought would have been disqualifying about the Trump administration just in the last 100 days that the public would have just, that's it. They're going to regurgitate here. There's going to be real pushback, and there hasn't been.
Yeah.
And I've come to a very crude conclusion, and maybe I shouldn't conclude it, or a thesis, I should say, that America would rather have an autocrat, a kleptocrat, than a weak party. And I saw a survey yesterday that said if the election were held yesterday, even knowing what we know so far in the Trump administration, that he would still win.
Yeah.
I'm curious what underlying or what shifts in the ground you felt led to his reelection and what's happened since then, and why it just doesn't seem as if there's anything that can actually be disqualifying.
Well, on that last point, I think I'm as confused as anyone. I mean, again, there are 1,000 things, any one of which would have totally wrecked the presidency of any other American president. I mean, this is something that President Obama remarked on from some stage recently, where he just said, can you imagine me doing any of these things? And then he went through a short list of things. Again, any one of which would have been a national scandal. I mean, just would have the news cycle would have never stopped ruminating on just how appalling that thing was. Whether it's launching a meme coin, which is a device calculated to accept bribes from crooks and foreign agents, and to very quickly reap hundreds of millions of dollars in profits thereby, grifting your credulous cult. That's just one thing. I mean, it sounds hyperbolic to say 1,000, but that's conservative. There's well more than 1,000 things Trump has done in the last 10 years, said or done, that would be perfectly disqualifying in another candidate or another president. I mean, the meme coin is such a shocking act of corruption. It's amazing we don't have very clear laws against it. Apparently, we don't. And we're just discovering that. So the job of the next president, whoever that, or I should say, the next sane and ethical president, whenever we get such a person, it may not be in the next round, obviously. That person's job is going to, in my view, is going to be to do a post-mortem on this decade of American history, political history, and try to figure out how we never become vulnerable to this kind of thing again. I mean, clearly we need a system that is immune, as immune as a system can be, to the private derangement and corruption of a bad actor, right? Because we've proven ourselves as a population, as a citizenry, perfectly capable of electing a patently unqualified, malicious, vindictive, and morbidly selfish person to the highest office in the land. We did that. I mean, we can wonder why we did that, but we've proved to ourselves and to the world that we're capable of doing that twice. Right? We're capable of electing a person who we knew last time around tried to steal the election and lied about it having been stolen from him, and told this lie again and again as a continuous provocation to political violence on the part of his cult. And all of this is so weird and so destructive of the faith that so many people have had in the stability of our system of governance that yeah, I think we have to figure out what laws we should have had to backstop some of the norms we thought were inviolate. all of which Trump and his administration have violated. So I mean, I'm totally mystified as to why people aren't as allergic to these norm violations as we are. I mean, there's just it's again, there's I could easily name dozens here off off the cuff, um, but it's I mean, take just adjacent to the meme coin, the fact that we now are a country wherein the president is using our foreign policy, our tariff policy, to privately, personally enrich himself. You know, when we slap a 46% tariff on Vietnam, the Vietnam's response to mitigate that harm to their economy is to invite Elon to give them internet service through Starlink, right? So that's clearly a conflict of interest and a moment of self-dealing there on the part of the administration, but then also to greenlight a $1.5 billion resort from the Trump administration, right, or from the Trump family. It's just how, you know, people in the perfect world, people would go to jail for this, right? I mean, and so I just don't know how our system is this vulnerable. It's quite shocking.
It's pretty obvious that the system, at least in the short term, does not have the resilience to arrest this or cauterize it. And I think a lot of Democrats are disappointed there hasn't been a more robust pushback. If you were advising the Democratic Party on how to be more effectively or robustly push back on what's going on, assuming the institutions aren't going to solve the problem right now, what advice would you give?
Well, that's very hard. It's hard to see what they can do. I mean, Cory Booker standing up for 25 hours and talking um, doesn't move the needle, as far as I can tell. I mean, there may be nothing to do short of winning the midterms decisively, and for that, I just think the Democrats have to learn the lesson, the obvious lesson of the presidential election in 2024, which is that the far left activist class of the party has no advice worth listening to, right? Their concerns are bogus. Their convictions are scarcely sane. They have to be ignored. I view Harris's loss as overdetermined, but she clearly lost based on her efforts to maintain something like a game of four-dimensional chess with woke identity politics, right? I mean, she was at a minimum, she was unable to properly disavow some of the crazy things she had said in 2019 and 2020, and just whenever put on the spot was either completely tongue tied and just stonewalling, or she just produced some sort of woke word salad. And it was obvious that she couldn't be let loose on Joe Rogan's podcast for fear of what she might say over the course of 3 hours. That caution, that sense that there are all these third rails you can't touch, otherwise the intersectional maniacs will come for you on X. That spell has to be totally broken, and I'm hopeful that it has been, but I've yet to see real evidence of it. I mean, what we need are charismatic candidates who will speak ad lib and at length, and um, in, with a perfectly carefree attitude with respect to all the various shibboleths that gave us wokeness over the last decade or so. I mean, it's just all of that has to be uh, just continuously violated with abandon. And I'm not saying that we suddenly turn into bigots, but there's clearly a line that protects any sane political commitment to social justice. I mean, of a sort that that could have come out of the mouth of someone like Martin Luther King Jr., um, which has us speaking sanely about things like immigration and youth gender dysphoria, et cetera, in ways that won't alienate half of American society. And we have to do that immediately, and we have to find the stars in the Democratic Party who stand a chance of getting elected to Congress and to the presidency in the next elections.
think it's fair to say that the Democrats have their hearts in the right place, but they go too far, and then they kind of invite an overreaction, and that's sort of playing out here.
Yeah, I mean, so in that sense, I find the left fairly culpable for Trump and Trumpism, right? I just think it was obvious what should have been said about all of these cultural war issues that would have been acceptable and sane, even if it departed from what the far right wants. It wouldn't have been a continuous SNL sketch of identitarian moral confusion, right? And so, given that the party got that captured by these, which was effectively a new religion at the center of which was a kind of moral panic. I mean, the idea that in the aftermath of a two-term black presidency, not only had we made no progress on race issues in this country, racism was somehow at its most excruciating high tide, right? Like it's just everything was wrong. Systemic racism was everywhere, and I mean, Joe Biden gave a speech. I think it was to Morehouse College very early in his presidency, uh, which was the most delusional piece of pandering to the far left on this particular issue. I mean, he stood up in front of these black graduates and said, the deck is so stacked against you. You're not only going to have to be the best, you're going to have to be better than the best to get your foot in the door in this society. It's so poisoned by racism. And he said this at a time when everyone, literally everyone, knew that not only was this not true, the opposite was true. If you're at all qualified, if you're a black graduate of a good institution in the year, this I guess was 2021, the chance that you were going to get into medical school or get a job at Netflix or get a job at the Ford Foundation or whatever, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, anywhere in any high status job, right, or position in academia, was not only not harmed by being black, you were positively advantaged by being black. Literally everyone knew this. They had known it for years, and yet the president of the United States is telling the graduating class of a black college that they're they're under the boot of a racist um, patriarchy. Undoubtedly, he would have added the variable of gender as well if he'd been given the chance. I mean, it was pure delusion, and everyone knew it. And so I think that bell has to be unrung somehow, left of center. I think it's in the process of being. I think we no longer believe this stuff, and DEI is now, the acronym is radioactive. I think for good reason. Again, none of this is to repudiate a commitment to civil rights, and none of it's to ignore that there are still real racists in our society and real threats of racism, and probably policies that meet the test of institutional racism that still need to be found and changed. I mean, all of that's true, but this tip over into reverse racism, which really was what DEI became, was totally dysfunctional and unethical, and yeah, I mean, it gave us, in large measure, it gave us Trumpism.
Do you distinguish between DEI efforts on campuses where, 60 years ago, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, 12 black people combined, that's a problem, but now 60% of Harvard's freshman class identifies as non-white, versus the corporate world where we still have, I think, about 80 of the Fortune 500 CEOs, or 16% are women, that there still are a lot of companies who their boards and their CEOs and their senior management just are much different than their broader employee base or their customer base. Do you make any distinction between kind of DEI and how far it's gone or not gone between academic institutions?
Well, I think it's a complex problem, and I think it changes depending on the context and the the identity you're talking about, right? So for like women in the workplace, there's the obvious variable of women deciding to have families, getting pregnant, and the asymmetry there. What happens to them versus what happens to men who ride shotgun with them and also just get to have families. um, that has obvious consequences. And I think that the wage gap. What I imagine is true is that if you correct for the effect of losing those years of your life to pregnancy and raising kids, that closes the wage gap, and it also probably accounts for some of the differing ambitions between men and women, um, and those are differences that we might not want to correct for in the end. We might want some other way of correcting for it. I mean, I think it's hard to know what is optimal there. I don't the idea that every person is just wants to be a CEO really at bottom and wants to make the sacrifices that entails. I think that's probably not true, and it's probably good that it's very good that it's not true. I just think we had a moment in the '60s where a fairly heavy-handed approach to righting the wrongs of the past was warranted, right? And so I think it was totally. I think our approach to affirmative action then was totally justifiable, and then we entered a period where it it um, it did all the good it could do, and it started doing some obvious harms, right? And I think it's what for me the goal is quite clear, and it is a goal that people like Martin Luther King Jr. explicitly articulated, which is we want to get to a colorblind society, which is not to say that it's a society where no one notices, the superficial characteristics between people, but that those characteristics don't matter, right? That there's no political or moral significance to the color of a person's skin. We want to get to that world, and we were and are, I think, very close to getting to that world. Some of us live in that world already. I mean, some in high status parts of culture, for much of the time, that's how you experience life. And I'm sure it is in other parts of culture. But insofar as we haven't perfectly gotten there, we want to get there. The problem with the far left is that they explicitly have disavowed that as the goal. They don't think color blindness is a rational goal. What they want to do is play this intersectional game of power politics across identity groups, wherein white males have the least rank, so you just flip the hierarchy on its head, and they want to prosecute this war of all against all until the end of time. Right? Again, this goal and the disavowal of colorblindness has been explicit. They think there's no getting over race. Race is just super important and super indelible, and therefore we've been living in a society. Again, I think the vapors of this lunacy are getting expunged, but it may take some years yet. But rolling back the clock prior to the 2024 election, we were living in a world where left of center people cared about race as much as the only people right of center who cared about race as much as the left wing of the Democratic Party are white supremacists and neo-Nazis and actual racists. I mean, that was what was so perverse about this. There were documents issued by like the Democratic Party itself, and certainly every activist group supporting it, which if you had done a search replace for white and black in those documents, they would have read like Ku Klux Klan pamphlets from the early 20th century, right? It was completely bonkers. And how we lived so long under that mania is again, is another one of these inscrutable things. I mean, we can now say the same thing about Trumpistan. I mean, how is it that all of this is passing among otherwise sane people? It's a mystery, but the left is largely culpable for this pendulum swing into populist know-nothingism and the way immigration got weaponized. I mean, yes, there were both sides accounted for how we got here.
We'll be right back. Support for the show comes from SoFi Small Business Lending. You're a small business owner, you need capital to find new opportunities and grow, and you can do that with help from SoFi. You might know SoFi for student loans and high-interest savings, But now they help small businesses too. No more chasing bankers or wasting time in a branch. SoFi's small business marketplace is your new go-to fast and digital solution. In one single simple search, SoFi matches you with vetted providers for your business in just minutes. You can discover options that meet your specific needs, and if you find a quote that works for you, you may receive funds as soon as the same day you're approved. Say it's working capital you need, or a line of credit, or an SBA loan, or equipment financing. SoFi's marketplace can help you find all of the above. It's already helped thousands of small businesses find the funding they need. SoFi also offers business owners curated tools, vetted business bank accounts, business credit card recommendations, and a ton of resources to help you scale your business like a boss. SoFi, now helping you get your business right. Visit SoFi.com/ProfGPod and see your options in minutes. Support for the show comes from Grüns. If you've ever gone down the rabbit hole of trying different nutrition solutions, you've likely had the thought, surely there's a way to improve my skin, gut health, immunity, and brain fog without offending my taste buds. Well, there is. It's called Grüns. Grüns are a convenient, comprehensive formula packed into 8 delicious gummies a day. It's not a multivitamin, a greens gummy, or a prebiotic. It's all of those things and then some at a fraction of the price. In a Grüns daily snack pack, you get more than 20 vitamins and minerals, plus more than 60 whole food ingredients, all of which help you out in different ways. For example, Grüns has 6 times the gut health ingredients compared to the leading green powders like biotin and niacinamide, which help with thicker hair, nails, and skin health. They also contain mushrooms, which can help with brain function. And of course, you're probably familiar with vitamin C and how great it is for your immune system. On top of all that, Grüns are vegan and free of nuts, dairy, and gluten. Get up to 45% off when you go to Grüns.co and use code ProfG. That's GRUNS.co, using code ProfG for 45% off. So you live in LA. I went to college in LA, UCLA, and in 1997, they did away with race-based affirmative action, and they moved to kind of an adversity score, which is essentially, the way I can best describe it, would be affirmative action based on income as opposed to race or sexual orientation. Do you think that's a good model, or are you part of the kind of merit-only philosophy?
No, I mean, I'm very worried, as I know you are, about wealth inequality and income inequality. I think wealth inequality more so. And I think correcting for that is an intrinsic good. I mean, I think that this is a real disparity in luck that people suffer everywhere, within our society and across societies. And insofar as we can cancel it, I mean, I think we should be tolerant of a certain amount of inequality, because I think it is part of the flywheel of capitalism, that some people can get up earlier in the morning and strive harder and, miss dinners with their kids and earn, more money as a result, because they just had that entrepreneurial ambition. I think we want to preserve that. I think we want all the incentives that, if there's a better incentive structure than capitalism, we haven't found it yet for producing wealth and creativity. Again, that we all benefit from, even the lazy benefit from it. But no, there are people who were born to immense advantages that others don't have, and we should try to figure out how to correct for that. And one of the disadvantages historically in the United States certainly has been the ambient level of racist bigotry and exclusion from economic opportunity on that basis, right? So yes, I mean, I think it's still true to say that Black families have on average 1/8 the level of stored wealth as white families. Um, and one must imagine that the legacy of racism has a lot to do with it. I mean, the crucial thing to realize, however, is that the thing that is stopping any person from getting ahead now is very unlikely to be racism now, right? So that's the thing that was so misguided about so much of DEI thinking, right? It's like if you wave a magic wand and get rid of all the racists, you're still not going to suddenly have more Fortune 500 people, more members of the Black community who are qualified to be Fortune 500 CEOs or cardiologists or et cetera. So there are economic disparities. There are which are riding on top of educational disparities and disparities in health outcomes, and single parent families at a much higher rate, et cetera. Um, and all of that, but if you use class as your proxy for all of your other concerns about disparities of outcome, again, educational, health, et cetera, um, I think you do a lot of good, and you also disproportionately help people of color because as a yeah, class, their identity, the various identity groups are highly correlated with disparities in class
It's a big overlap.
difference. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're both dads. Um, we think a lot about and write a lot about and speak a lot about the struggles of young men right now. They're just as well and as much advantage as men have registered over the last, several hundred, couple thousand years. The last 20, 30 years, it would be hard to point to a group that's done worse in America than young men. I'm curious, as a dad and as someone who's a keen observer of culture and society, what do you think has led to this? And any thoughts as a dad or just someone as an observer on how um, what we can do or what society, assuming you agree it's a problem, can do to help sort of right the ship around young men, again, starting to participate or be more productive members of society?
Well, I must say, as a father of two girls, one in her teens and one soon to be, it's very easy for me to be taken in by the view of young men as just rapacious hoodlums who need to be viewed as a problem. But I can dimly remember that I was once a young man, and I know this problem from the other side, obviously. Um, no, I mean, I think you have been a great voice of reason on this topic and a counterpoint to many of the examples that are getting that are serving as sort of pathological attractors to young men in our society. I mean, people like Andrew Tate, right? Like you're like the anti Andrew Tate, um, and that's a good thing. I mean, we need more people like you who are modeling masculinity in a way that is ethical and just kind of conversant in the skill set you want young men to be conversant in, right? I mean, it's amazing if you kind of hold your body of work up against the Andrew Tatification of similar topics. It's you're checking similar boxes, right? I mean, it's like it's all economic independence is one variable, but when you when you look at when you look at the diabolical version of it, it is all about just the most obscene materialism, right? Without any deeper aspiration, right? Without any ethical engagement with the problems of this world. It's just if you can get a Bugatti, or rent one in Dubai, and pretend to your fans that this is your lifestyle, um, you've basically accomplished everything you need in life, right? I mean and so that is something that we need to offer a counterpoint to. And I think you're doing that. I think you're doing a great job of it.
I think you're being generous, but if you think about,
No, I mean, honestly, not. I mean, it's just you're there. I think you do a fantastic job of putting the lie to the notion that money can't buy you happiness in any sense, right? I mean, we know that's not true. We know that being poor or being subject to not even poor, but just having financial stress be a major component of your life, we know that's corrosive to a feeling of well-being, and we know it's corrosive to marriages and relationships, and so you have taken the taboo off of talking about wealth in an aspirational way, and you found a way of doing it that's not icky, that's not um, that doesn't disregard the problem of wealth inequality and the ethical burden of being generous and creating a social safety net and paying taxes and everything in that bucket that is the antithesis of what the president of the United States or his various acolytes like Elon Musk message about. I mean, it's counter programming that's absolutely necessary, and so I view you as a great messenger of what it's like to be a good citizen and a good man and just a mensch. I mean, the word we have, the only good word we have for it is Yiddish. It's you're a mensch. So keep it up.
Let me just say I'm really enjoying this podcast so far, Sam.
Yeah.
So, like,
Uh,
young men are going to look up to just naturally the president of the United States and the world's wealthiest man. And I don't think Donald Trump, I'm not sure Donald Trump was ever what you would call an aspirational man or a good person. But my sense is, and you've written about this, Elon Musk, you were friends with and had a lot of
yeah.
admiration for. And I think you had a similar type of relationship with Joe Rogan.
Yep.
And then, and I see one of the things I love about America is I do think there's a zeitgeist, guideposts, a natural gravity towards once you experience success, it becomes correlated with trying to be kinder or start to think bigger picture about leaving your mark on society in a positive way. Even the robber barons at some point flipped the script and said, what can I build here with my wealth that would serve society well?
Yeah.
And it seems as if those rivers have reversed and that some of our most powerful people, as they get more powerful or a broader platform, don't evolve but digress. And do you have any sense for why that is happening now across some of our most powerful and influential men?
Yeah. Well, I think just a few people can do a lot of harm to the culture. Right? I mean, you have in the person of Elon just this unique example of somebody who has so many obvious, genuine gifts. I mean, above all, as an entrepreneur, I mean, he's clearly has a vision and can sell that vision to lots of talented people and to tens of thousands of talented people who will stumble over themselves to get a chance to work for him, and they can do some amazing things, right? So he's aspirational and a great model of success in that regard. But he's had this kind of personal unraveling, which I'm at pains to explain, apart from just the influence that Twitter and now X has had on his brain, and the influence of fame, I guess, a certain kind of fame to which he's clearly addicted. That has just encouraged him to become this very different sort of person. And whether he was always this sort of person, just kind of waiting to get out, and I didn't see it, I don't know. I mean, I'm forced to believe one of two things: either he's changed a lot, having become the richest and one of the most famous people on earth, um, or or I just didn't know him in the first place, right? So, and
Let me just press pause. You're a
yeah,
neuroscientist. Do you think ketamine could have anything to do with it?
yeah. I mean, I just I've heard the reports that you've heard. I mean, this was reported in the Wall Street Journal. Um, if I wanted to dig in his circle, like I'm sure I could find firsthand reports of how much of that's true. But yeah, if he is using ketamine as frequently as was reported, that certainly can't help, right? I mean, but he's just honestly, his engagement with X was so dysfunctional for so long, even before he bought it, and it became his seemingly full time preoccupation. It's just this. It did something. I mean, everyone who was ever addicted to it or is just too fixated on it has a homeopathic dose of this. I mean, they know it. Like I got off of Twitter now 2.5 years ago because of how demonstrably harmful it was proving in my life, and I was never somebody who was addicted to it. I was just somebody who was using it as an author and as a speaker and podcaster. I just thought it was a necessary marketing channel, and it was also just very tempting to talk to other prominent people and try to clean up misinformation and react to things. And so I was using it in a normal way. I mean, and I do not consider Elon's use of it at all normal. Um, but it was still, uh, probably the worst thing I did to my life in the last 10 years, right? And and getting off of it was, I'm always embarrassed to admit, the best thing, the best life hack I have found in the last decade. I mean, it was completely transformational of my life to get off Twitter, and that's just a sign of how debasing it was for me to use it the way I was using it. And again, I was not a super tweeter. I was maybe uh, on average once a day or so, a couple of times a day, but I would go for days without doing it. But it was still punctuating my life in a way and amplifying a certain kind of signal in a way that was proving quite harmful and quite disorienting. I mean, it was turning me into a bit of a misanthrope. I mean, I was seeing the worst in people, pretty much all the time. I mean, just whenever I looked at my phone, I was just seeing some awful piece of uh, dishonesty or malice broadcast to me by people who I knew in norm, certainly most of them in their private and even public lives were not this sort of person, but in this context, it was amplifying for the worst in people. And so, Elon has just performed a kind of human sacrifice of himself on the altar of that set of incentives, and he acts like whether he is a psychopath or not, he acts like one, right? And I'm not actually exaggerating. He acts like a psychopath on X. Um, he's completely callous as to the harms he caused, and all the while knowing the harms he causes, both in the lives of private citizens who get doxxed and get swarmed by his cult. Um, and just the harm he causes in the world. I mean, just his adventures in Doge when he, fed on his account fed USAID into the wood chipper, and stopped life-saving programs in sub-Saharan Africa, which people immediately recognized would lead to death, in very short order, and if not corrected for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of deaths within a year, right? The attitude he took to all of that was one of just, probably, fentanyl-addled um, ecstasy, right? I mean, he just reveled in the chaos he was causing. And so it was with his, Hitler salutes, which, may have not been Hitler salutes. I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt that he's just a moron who has just bad, awkward body English. Who knows what he was up to there with his "My heart goes out to you," and now I look like Adolf Hitler, twice in a row. But whatever his intentions, when he saw the blowback, when he saw when he saw that every anti-Semite on planet Earth was celebrating, right? He could have very easily have signaled to his 210 million, whatever it was at that point, followers. Listen, this is I see what that looked like. Sorry, that's embarrassing. Obviously, I despise anti-Semitism, and if you're an anti-Semite, please unfollow me. Right? Like that would have been the sane, ethical, manly thing to do, right? But instead, he just made Nazi jokes and trolled the world, right? All the while signal boosting the accounts of real anti-Semites and bringing real anti-Semites back onto Twitter with great fanfare. People like Nick Fuentes, and also funding the far right party in Germany to boot. Right? I mean, it's just so his contributions to the greatest eruption of anti-Semitism in our lifetime have been at best ambiguous. Um, and Yeah, it's just totally irresponsible. So the fact that he is the cultural influence he um, has been directly harmful to a generation of young men who have worshipped him. I mean, I think the greatest thing to ding his reputation, and it really should have been a fatal blow, was the gaming controversy, where it was revealed he was pretending to be one of the best gamers on earth. I don't know if you saw this, Scott. But, a bunch of gamers saw him play one of these games in public, and it was totally clear. I'm not a gamer, so I can't get into the details here, but apparently it was clear to a moral certainty that he did not have the skills he was pretending to have. He had paid someone to build out his character, someone very likely, in China, to play 24 hours a day and build out his character to superhuman levels. so that he could inherit all those powers and then display them ineptly in front of the gamers who actually knew how to play the game. But he had gone on Joe Rogan's podcast and Lex Fridman's podcast and lied to their face about being a top 10 and in some cases, the best gamer in the world on certain games. And when they lavished praise on him, just talking about what you just that suggested that he has, a kind of a neurological, a Sigma level, neurological health that would predispose him to those abilities. He totally owned it. It's like, yeah, it's gaming is a great surrogate for all kinds of talents, and yeah, it's really, and he was lying about all that, right? So that, if anything was going to destroy his reputation with young men, I thought that was going to be it, and I think it probably did in gaming circles.
We'll be right back. Support for the show comes from NPR's Planet Money. Tariffs, the budget deficit, the difference between flying coach and business class. What ties them together? One word: money. It's the connective tissue of our lives that drives behavior, shapes culture, and reveals who we are in a tangible way. Economics isn't just inflation and GDP, it's everywhere and everything fueling how we live. If you're looking for a smart, entertaining breakdown of how the world of money really works, check out Planet Money from NPR. It's sharp, fast, and relentlessly curious. The Planet Money hosts go to great lengths to help explain the economy. They've done things like shoot a satellite into space, become a record label, make a comic book, and shorted the entire stock market, all to help you better understand the world around you. If you're curious to learn something new and exciting about economics every week, listen to the Planet Money podcast from NPR. I love NPR, grew up with it, and generally find they try and call balls and strikes and think the production values are unprecedented. Tune into Planet Money every week for entertaining stories and insights about how money shapes our world. Stories that can't be found anywhere else. Listen now to Planet Money from NPR. Support for this show comes from Smalls Cat Food. Have you seen those ads where there's a pet that looks so sad when they're forced to eat bad food? No pet wants to live like that, even if they're just being a really good animal actor. And giving your cat some actually tasty and nutritious food can get them looking great. And Smalls Cat Food is here to help your feline friend enjoy their next meal. Smalls Cat Food has protein-packed recipes made with preservative-free ingredients you'd find in your fridge, and it's delivered right to your door. And now you can add other cat favorites, including amazing treats and snacks, to your Smalls order. The team at Smalls is so confident your cat will love their product that you can try it risk-free. That means they will refund you if your cat won't eat their food. What are you waiting for? Give your cat the food they deserve. For a limited time only, because you are a Prop G listener, you can get 35% off Smalls plus an additional 50% off your first order by using our code PropG. That's an additional 50% off when you head to smalls.com and use promo code PropG. Again, that's promo code PropG for an additional 50% off your first order plus free shipping at smalls.com. It's funny, I was more offended by him having a fake account that posted a picture of him with his kid on his shoulders and having the fake account said, "You're an amazing dad, Elon."
I hadn't heard that.
I just saw it.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
But I have to credit you. The first time we had dinner, you gave me permission to get off of Twitter. I said, I acknowledge that probably 20 or 30% of my mental health episodes over the last few years had been triggered by something on Twitter. And you said, "Why are you there?" And I'm like, "Well, you got a big following, 500,000 people." And I think, how many did you walk away from?
I think I had 1.5 million when I pulled the cord.
And I got off. And it's exactly what you said. It's been one of the most accretive things to my mental health that I've done in the last 10 years. And what you realize, I'm curious if you feel this way. Once you're off it 3 or 4 months, you recognize just how small it is. So it really is a small part of the world that is occupying way too much of your world. I have no difference in my life. None. Except I don't venture into this strange moon of Mars that's hostile and biased and weird and angry. And it's like, why was I vacationing there? 7 times a day. I'm curious. I've talked a lot about this a lot on the pod. And when I was younger, I didn't have enough anxiety. I wasn't worried about anything. I almost failed out of UCLA several times. I didn't really care. Almost got fired a lot. Didn't really care. Sleepwalking through life. Kind of 30 to 40, the right amount of anxiety. Enough anxiety to be productive, worry about the right things. Now I have too much anxiety. I worry about everything. Anything happens with my kids, I worry. And lately, I've had a really difficult time disassociating from things I can control and I can't control, specifically some of the things that are happening around the Trump administration. I mean, it, it's it, it's like this shit really rattles me. Like
Mm.
it's taking time from my presence and ability to just stay focused on the really important things in my life, such as when I'm with my kids or with my partner. I'm curious if you struggle with some of those same things, an inability to disassociate from some of these things that are going on. And if you are able to do with it, what are the vehicles and practices for helping you do that?
Yeah, well, as you know, or I think you know, meditation has been a very big focus of mine, and I mean, for me, that really is it's a kind of superpower because I mean, at a certain point, you recognize that your mind is all you have, really. I mean, obviously, you have a body, you have circumstances in the world. I mean, things matter, but your reaction to what happens is so much more important in almost every case than than what happens. There's so much room for on the negative side, being needlessly, pointlessly unhappy, right? I mean, worrying when worry does absolutely no good, and you just suffer twice, right? If the bad thing happens, and you were worrying the whole time before it happened, well, then you got to suffer all the way up to the bad thing happening. If it didn't happen, your worry was truly a hallucination. But in no case I mean, for me, negative mental states like anxiety are useful in a very punctate way in that they give you information about the world or your place in the world or something that needs to be responded to. But then for virtually every moment thereafter, that state, whether it's anxiety or anger or impatience or just pick your flavor, um, that state is almost always counterproductive, right? Which is to say, you want to be in a different state when you're actually solving the problem at hand, or you're just waiting to see what happens, right? I mean, there are many problems, as you point out, that we're powerless to solve, and we're just kind of witnessing this kind of slow rolling emergency. Um, the question is, how unhappy do you have to be just living under that condition of uncertainty? And the answer you find when you learn to meditate is not unhappy at all, really. And so my life is a very strange bifurcation between having kind of a very high level of personal well-being, certainly most of the time, and also being very concerned about the state of our world, right? I mean, so I spend most of my time professionally and even just, personally, privately, focusing on the bad things that are happening and the bad things that may yet happen, the bad things I think it's rational to worry, will happen or very likely will happen. Um, and Yet my life is so good. It's so good in superficial, contingent ways that could change. Much of that is born of my ability to notice what I'm doing with my attention and to cease to do the dumb thing that is causing me to be miserable in this moment, right?
And you get that perspective from meditation?
Yeah, I mean, mindfulness, for lack of a better word. I mean, that does cover basically what I mean, but it's something I get into in much greater detail in over at Waking Up, which is the meditation app that I have, and in my book by that same title. But briefly, it's just, I mean, if you're suffering, you are almost certainly thinking without noticing your thinking, without noticing the power of thought to determine how you feel and react in each moment to just your sensory, your raw sensory existence, right? I mean, in each moment, you're just seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking, and therefore feeling various moods and emotions. Um, and the role that thought plays there, the role that our captivity to thought, our unawareness of any alternative to being identified with each thought that passes through consciousness, that role is decisive. I mean, it's every bit as decisive as when you're asleep and dreaming and you don't know you're dreaming, right? You're safely in your bed. In reality, you're safely in your bed, but you're having some horrible dream that plunges you into shame, right, or fear or some other negative mental state. the neurology of that, right? The failure of reality testing, the fact that your conscious life can be completely subsumed by self-generated imagery. Um, that is a version of that is happening to us in the waking state, and we call it thought. We call it ourselves, really. We call it me. It's like, what are you talking about? It's just me here. I'm thinking. I'm the thinker, right? These thoughts are in my voice, right? That sense of being identified with thought is something that is a spell that gets broken ultimately when you actually learn how to meditate, and it does give you this degree of freedom that people otherwise don't have, which is to just get off the ride, right? You're feeling miserable because you're thinking about the thing that happened yesterday or the thing that might happen tomorrow. You can actually get off that ride, and you can get off of it even if it's a real problem, right? It's like your kid has some scary illness, and you're going from doctor to doctor, and you don't know what's what, and you have real reason to be worried, right? I've been in that situation. It's of course you're going to be unhappy, but the question is, how unhappy do you have to be? How contracted do you have to be? How ruled do you have to be by your thoughts from this moment to until you get the appointment next Tuesday, or until you get the results of the scan. You got a scan on Friday, and perversely, we have a medical system that doesn't work on weekends, right? So you have to wait till Monday for the results of an MRI, if you're lucky. Uh, how how riddled by anxiety do you have to be? Meditation gives you a freedom to just enjoy the beauty of your life in the meantime, because you're going to be there to deal with it when you actually have to deal with it. I mean, Monday will come around, and then you'll be the guy who has to absorb whatever information you get. And the question is, do you want to do that well, and to be a good father in that context? Do you want to be the guy who was just racked by anxiety all weekend, or do you want to be the guy who actually had a good time with his kids on the weekend, and then you get the information on Monday, right? It's like we're all going to die, Scott. You know where this is all going, right? We're going to die. Our kids hopefully are going to live long enough to be old enough to be, the ripe old age that it's appropriate to die. But impermanence reigns, right? So the question is, how can we be happy under conditions where the punchline is that everything changes, right? And that everything that is gathered gets ultimately dispersed, right? That's the situation we're in. The people who first figured out how to meditate figured out that how you use attention really matters and really can spell the difference between happiness and suffering in each moment.
As you've gotten older, the things that give you joy and peace, have they changed, become certain things more or less?
I think I'm a slightly odd case because I got very into meditation and became very cognizant of the finiteness of life very early, right? So I was probably 18. I mean, I became kind of obsessed with my own mortality earlier than that. My best friend died when I was 13. My dad died when I was 17. So loss was something that uh, I understood fairly early, and the sort of the philosophical and psychological implications of that became interesting to me very early. So I was always kind of a student of life-changing philosophy. I mean, not just purely academic questions of interest, but just sort of like, well, what does it mean to live a good life? Like, in a context where we know we're ultimately going to lose everything. Uh, and so I was thinking about that very early. So I can't say that has changed. I just, in some ways, I'm relearning the lessons I learned when I was 18 and 19 and 20. Um, and they're landing harder and perhaps slightly differently now. But it's a continuation of where my head has been at for many decades. I have to say.
Would you describe the loss of your father as sort of a defining or the defining moment in your life? Like, has there been one moment that sort of changed or your orientation or approach to life, or given you, set you on a different path?
Well, it was less so in this case. I mean, we were close, but it was a long distance relationship. He had left when I was 2.5, and
So you were raised
moved.
by a single mother, or did she remarry?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, she eventually got remarried when I was 15. But yeah, no, for all intents and purposes, I was raised by a single mom, and she
It's
was
funny. I was raised by a single mother too, and I didn't know that about you. Can you talk a
yeah.
little bit about? I think almost everything I see, almost everything, the way I respond through the lens of being raised by a single mother. Can you talk a little bit about how that impact had on you as an adult and your approach to partnership and being a dad?
Yeah, well, so again, this is a case that is going to be somewhat atypical because my mom was just both very, very talented and very lucky, right? So she really did not have resources. My dad left. I think on her account, he I think cut one child support check of $500, something like that. But I mean, he really did not discharge his responsibilities as a dad very well. I mean, he was a struggling actor, so he didn't have money either. But he was painting houses at that time to make money. But he abandoned me and my mom, to go be an actor in New York. He couldn't figure out how to do that in L.A. for some reason. So that attests to some other lack of commitment to being a parent. But my mom discovered one day that she could write television shows, and she discovered this very quickly. I mean, I think she actually sold her first script. She was just watching television one day, trying to figure out how she was going to make money. Again, we really had nothing, um, and I think I mean, I forget it was maybe $2,500 or something. But she sold the first thing she wrote, and then just became a colossus within the television industry. And she eventually, I mean, her big hit was Golden Girls. She created Golden Girls, and so we went from being poor to being wealthy over the course of it was probably a little more than a decade. I mean, I think I was
Oh my God, Susan Harris!
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I literally just thought
She's
kept
my
seeing
mom.
through
Yeah,
this. I keep saying I thought I've seen the name Susan Harris in the credits of all these series in the
yeah,
'70s and
yeah.
'80s.
No,
That
no,
was your
my
mom.
mom is awesome.
Where's
Yeah.
your mom?
Um,
Wow.
but it was a very weird time course, and so there's a funny story that she likes to tell, which maybe says more about me than I would like. But I mean, she was working really hard. Again, she was a single mom, so I grew up with a long string of babysitters. And when I would come home from school, there would be a babysitter. My mom would be writing at the office. And at one point, she came to me and she said, and we were living in a little rented house in the San Fernando Valley, and but I was going to a private school um, that she had stretched to get me into, and so I was surrounded by kids who had much more money than we did. And she said to me, I don't remember this, but I'm sure this is true because was indelibly etched upon her memory. She said, you know, if I have an opportunity here, if I work much harder than I'm working now, um, we're gonna our situation's going to change, and you'll be able to one day you'll be able to have a pool in the backyard like your friend Tom Brown, he had a great house with a great pool. And but you're gonna have less of me. You're going to spend more time with babysitters, and so there's going to be a sacrifice. And apparently, I thought for a few seconds, and I turned to her and I said, "Get the pool, Mom."
I want the pool.
And
I'm
so,
literally sitting here. I'm not exaggerating,
uh,
Sam. I'm freaking
yeah,
out. Yeah, I feel like you've raised me through my 50s, but your mother, I just figured out, kind of
yeah,
raised me. I was a child of television. Oh
uh,
my, Soap is the first
soap.
time I was
Yeah,
ever
yeah.
introduced to a gay man, Billy Crystal.
Well, that was not
Benson,
only you, not only you. That's
America.
often credited with writing the first truly positive. I mean, I'm not sure it's totally aged well. I mean, it was probably
I'm
more
sure. There's
caricatured
no
than
way.
you would want, but um, it's the first truly positive role for a gay character in television. I
Yeah,
believe that's
he
true.
wasn't like a psycho killer or a pedophile.
Yeah,
And then the first time I ever saw a black man in a position of leadership was Benson, which is also
yeah,
your
yeah,
mother's show.
yeah, yeah.
And then when my mom was 6, she and I used to watch Everyone Loves Raymond, Frasier, and The Golden Girls.
Right.
Eh,
Yeah.
Wow,
So
that is just wild. So
and
look,
quite and quite
I
quite heroically, she wrote. I think this is a. I mean, this may not sound as impressive as it is because people don't know how television gets made, but she famously wrote. She didn't have a writing staff for soap, so she wrote, I believe, is the first 75 episodes all by herself. I mean, she was banging out one episode a week of television, 22 weeks a year, all by herself. Uh, and I mean, very few people have done that in television. So it was quite amazing.
So just as we wrap up here, you gave me a piece of advice about being a dad a couple of years ago that I've really held on to, and I want you to. I'm going to try and prompt you to remember it. But you said you figured out that you just, in certain instances, just needed to be dad. Can you speak more about that?
Yeah, I mean, and part of this was my realizing what I wanted in a school. I mean, I just wanted to outsource all of the role of being a teacher to the school so that, and I must say that this has been achieved imperfectly in my daughter's schools, but I just wanted to be able to say, oh, yeah, Mrs. Johnson, she's a hard teacher, and just commiserate with my daughters without ever having to tiger mom anything, right? I just don't want to be that guy. And the truth is, I'm just not comfortable being that guy. I don't like the subtext of apparently conditional love that gets communicated when you really push. And so I haven't. And I mean, both my daughters are good students, and they're getting educated. But there's definitely a difference between tiger momming it and not. And I'm definitely not. And I realize I just want to have I want there to be no doubt in my daughter's minds how much I love them and how much I rejoice in who they are as people. And so whenever I'm in a mode that stands a chance of confusing that, I'm alert to the downside there. So I just yeah, and as a result, I have very little stature in the home as a as a source of knowledge or wisdom. Uh, I mean, when push comes to shove, that's probably not true. But there's a fair amount of comedy had at my expense. I mean, I'm in a unlike you, I'm in a household with 3 girls, or 2 girls and a mother, and it's there's very little testosterone in the home. So
Sam
I maybe
Harris is a
yeah.
neuroscientist, philosopher, best-selling author, and host of the Making Sense podcast. Sam, just to put some additional pressure on you, when people ask me who my role model is, I cite you. So if something happens, so I really hope for just selfish reasons you keep
Mhm.
killing it, because if you go down, you're probably taking me with you.
Okay. Well,
So I need you
yeah.
to remain to be thoughtful and courageous and fearless and well-read and rigorous in your research, but always enjoy our time together. And I really do look at you as someone who looks at the issues and I've tried to model this, and then says what you believe is right,
Mm.
regardless of what heckling from the cheap seats or shame you might endure. And it's something that's given me a lot of courage and discipline to say, okay, in an attempt to find the truth, where does it take you? As opposed to constantly checking myself and thinking, well, what will the reaction be? So thank you.
Nice, nice. Well, thank you, and high praise. But I'll try to keep it together.